The courtroom was too cold for a child, both in temperature and in tone. The harsh fluorescent lights glared down on every expression, every tremble of a hand, and every muffled whisper from the back benches. But none of that mattered to Ellie. 3-year-old Ellie sat quietly at the edge of the long wooden bench, her little legs dangling in the air. Her small fingers clutched the ear of a threadbare stuffed elephant, one eye missing, its fabric faded. From love and time, next to her, her mother, Rachel, sat rigid and pale, eyes flicking between the judge, her attorney, and the man across the courtroom, Ellie's father. It was a custody battle, but not just any. This one had a layer of tension most didn't. Rachel had accused the father of criminal ties and past trauma that endangered Ellie. He denied everything, portraying Rachel as paranoid and unstable. It had come to this, a full hearing, with Ellie right in the room, a silent child caught in adult crossfire. Ellie hadn't spoken in nearly a month, no crying, no laughing, just silence. Therapists called it selective mutism, likely triggered by trauma. But no one truly knew what she'd seen or what she remembered. "Your Honor," said Rachel's attorney, standing. "Given the child's condition and emotional distress, the mother has requested a courtroom comfort animal to accompany her during these proceedings. With the court's permission." The judge looked up from his papers, brows raised skeptically. "A dog?" "Yes, sir. A trained, certified courtroom comfort dog. He's with the sheriff's office." The judge sighed but waved a hand. "Fine. Bring him in." The heavy double doors creaked open. Everyone turned out and walked Officer Isabella Torres, a lean, sharp-eyed woman in uniform, holding the leash of a large, imposing German shepherd. The dog walked with slow, purposeful steps, its chest scarred, one ear slightly bent. It was Rex. Rex was no ordinary dog. He had once belonged to the K9 unit of the local police force. He'd saved lives, tracked down fugitives, and survived a deadly raid that left his partner, a beloved officer, dead. Since then, he had been retired from active duty, but he hadn't stopped working. Rex had been trained to serve again, this time not chasing criminals but calming children too scared to speak. Rachel didn't know what to expect. She had never met Rex, but the therapist insisted it was worth a try. As soon as Rex entered the room, Ellie looked up, and for the first time in hours, her eyes came alive, her body tensed, her stuffed animal slipping from her grip and landing on the floor with a soft thud. Her gaze locked onto the dog. Unblinking, she didn't cry or flinch. She stared, not with fear, but with recognition. Officer Torres noticed it too. She gave the leash a gentle tug, guiding Rex forward toward the witness bench. Ellie's feet dangled, unmoving, her hands gripped the edge of the seat. The moment Rex came within 3 feet of her, he stopped. He didn't sit, didn't lie down like he usually did. He stood tall, alert, ears up, tail still, and he stared back at her. For a full 10 seconds, they simply looked at each other, dog and girl, as if they shared a silent conversation that no one else could hear. Then, Ellie slowly leaned forward, her hand, tiny and shaking, reached out. No one told her to. No one guided her. Her fingers found Rex's soft fur, just under his ear, and she whispered, not out loud, but in her breath, something no one caught. Rex moved closer on his own, rested his head gently on her lap, and let out a soft sigh, as if saying, "I remember." "You too." A stir ran through the room. The judge looked up from his papers again. Rachel's lips trembled. The silence was no longer cold. It was full of something everyone could feel, but no one yet understood. The courtroom was no longer just a place of arguments and evidence. Something else had entered, and it had only just begun. Officer Isabella Torres had worked with plenty of retired K9 South, but Rex was different. There was a seriousness in him, an awareness. He'd seen more than most humans ever would. His previous handler, Officer Brian Hull, had called him a soldier in fur, and after Brian's death in a raid gone wrong, Rex had changed. He'd stopped barking. He only obeyed when necessary. He didn't play. And yet, in the courtroom today, Torres saw something she hadn't seen in Rex in nearly 2 years: softness. Ellie's tiny fingers rested on his neck now, right between the scars. She traced the lines with innocent curiosity, not knowing those marks were from bullets and broken glass. Rex didn't flinch. Instead, he leaned in as if he'd been waiting for her touch since that awful night long ago. Torres crouched beside them, watching quietly. "She's never done that with anyone," Rachel whispered to her lawyer. "Not even me." The judge observed silently for a moment. "Is the child comfortable now?" "She appears to be, Your Honor." Rachel's attorney replied. "Proceed." Testimony resumed. Lawyers fired questions back and forth like a tennis match. The father claimed the mother had kept Ellie away unfairly. He spoke of job losses and just mistakes, nothing dangerous. His voice was calm, measured. But Ellie never looked at him. She kept her hand on Rex. During a short break, the therapist approached. "That's not just comfort," she said to Torres. "That's recognition. She knows that dog." Torres's brow furrowed. "She can't," she replied. "She's 3. Rex hasn't been on an active call in 2 years. His last mission was..." She trailed off. The therapist tilted her head. "Was what?" Torres hesitated. "A drug raid. Ended badly. 1 officer killed. Rex took a bullet to the shoulder and still dragged the guy out. He was retired right after. He hasn't worked around kids since then until now." The therapist knelt to Ellie's level. "Sweetheart, have you seen this dog before?" Ellie didn't answer. She stared at the dog's face, fingers tightening slightly on his fur. A moment passed. Then Ellie whispered something, too soft for anyone but Rex to hear. He wagged his tail. The first movement from him all day. Torres looked up sharply. "What did she say?" The therapist shook her head. "I didn't catch it, but it wasn't random." They returned to the courtroom. The judge asked if Ellie was ready to be questioned gently, or at least acknowledged. The therapist nodded. Ellie was placed in the witness chair beside Rex, who remained calmly seated at her feet. Then came the moment that froze the courtroom. The judge leaned forward. "Ellie, do you know this dog?" She blinked. Her lips parted. She pointed a tiny finger at Rex, looked at the judge, and said clearly, "Boom boom." A ripple of gasps spread through the room. Torres's breath caught in her throat. The judge raised his hand. "Excuse me, what did she say?" Ellie repeated it, louder this time. "Boom boom." And then, she patted her own chest twice. "Boom boom." The bailiff stepped forward instinctively, unsure what was happening. Torres stood slowly. Her voice was shaky but clear. That was Rex's activation command during raids. Boom boom meant advance. It was the signal to protect his partner. The courtroom went still. Not a single person moved. Rachel's hands flew to her mouth. "That command was classified," Torres added. "Only his handler and I knew it. It was never made public." The judge looked stunned. "Are you saying this child? She must have been there." Torres whispered. "Wherever Rex last deployed, wherever he last heard the command, she was there." The judge looked down at Ellie again, now stroking Rex gently as he licked her hand. "I think we need to reopen a file," the judge said. "Right now." Ellie said nothing more, but the courtroom no longer saw her as a silent child. She was a key witness to something far bigger than a custody dispute, and she had just unlocked a door no one expected. The courtroom didn't move for several seconds. The echo of Ellie's tiny voice, "boom boom," still lingered in the air like a bell that refused to stop ringing. Some in the gallery shifted uncomfortably. The judge leaned back in his chair, adjusting his glasses with trembling fingers. No one was prepared for this. This wasn't a case of neglect or parental alienation anymore. It was something darker. Ellie, unaware of the stir she'd caused, simply sat quietly beside Rex. Her hand rose and fell on his back rhythmically, like the way children soothe themselves, by stroking a blanket or thumb. But this wasn't self-soothing, this was familiarity. Officer Torres couldn't stop staring at the little girl. "She knows him," she muttered. "Not from today, from before." The therapist nodded slowly. "It's not just recognition. That command, boom boom, it's connected to trauma." She didn't say it to activate him. She said it because she remembers him reacting to it. Torres crouched down beside Rex. "Did she see Brian fall?" She whispered aloud to no one in particular. Her partner, Officer Brian Hall, had died in that last raid shot just moments after using Rex's activation command. The raid had been in a suburban duplex, a drug house. The scene had been chaotic, but it was assumed only dealers were inside. But what if someone else had been there? Someone small and forgotten. The judge cleared his throat. "Court is in recess for 1 hour. I want all personnel from the original police report on Rex's last deployment pulled now." He slammed the gavel. Rachel grabbed Ellie and held her tight, tears falling down her face. In the corner, the father's expression had gone pale. He wasn't speaking. His lawyer leaned in, whispering furiously. He only shook his head. She couldn't remember that. He mumbled she was too young to remember what. Torres stood quickly, pulling out her phone and stepping into the hallway. Within moments, she was speaking to someone from the department's records division. "I need full body cam footage from the August 12th raid, Officer Brian Hall's last call," she said. "There may have been a child present." "No, this isn't for review. This is a court order." I need it now. Inside the courtroom, Ellie fidgeted in her mother's arms. She looked over at Rex, then slid out of her seat and walked to him without a word. She sat beside him on the floor. He didn't move, only turned his big head and rested his chin on her knee. It was like a reunion, and yet no one knew what they were witnessing. Rachel knelt beside them. Did the doggy save you, sweetheart? She asked softly. Ellie didn't speak, but she nodded once, slowly. Then she patted her chest again. Boom boom, she whispered once more. This time, Rex's tail gave a single slow wag. A bond had been reawakened, one built in chaos and terror, but anchored in protection. And that bond had just blown open the doors on a case long thought closed. Back in the judge's chambers, footage began downloading. Officer Torres and 2 other detectives sat staring at a monitor. The grainy video began to play. Rex's camera showed him weaving through a house of broken furniture and crumbling drywall, shouting, gunfire, a figure falling, Rex charging forward, and then there, under a collapsed table, a tiny child's hand, gripping a stuffed elephant. Pause it, Torres shouted. She froze the frame. The elephant in the video had one missing eye, exactly like the one Ellie clutched now. Oh my God, one officer whispered. She was there. She saw everything. They didn't need confirmation anymore. Ellie had been the hidden witness the whole department missed. And she'd just found the one soul who hadn't forgotten her. Back in the courtroom, no one dared speak above a whisper. Word had quickly spread among staff and observers. The girl had been inside the house during Rex's final deployment, a place thought to hold only armed suspects had, in truth, hidden a child now pointing at a retired police dog, and saying the 2 words that echoed through tragedy, boom boom. When Judge Metcalf returned to the bench, he wasn't the same stoic figure. His eyes were softer, his voice slower. We will allow the admission of new evidence, and this courtroom will not close until we understand what truly happened 3 years ago. Rachel clutched Ellie as she re-entered the courtroom. Rex walked beside them like a guardian angel. He stayed at Ellie's side, his body tense but calm like a soldier back on duty. The prosecutor stood. Your Honor, with the court's permission, we'd like to present visual evidence from the August 12th raid. Body camera footage confirms that a child was inside the property unreported, undocumented. We believe this child is Ellie Morgan. Rachel looked away, trembling. The judge nodded solemnly. Proceed. The lights dimmed, a large screen rolled forward, and there it was, the final mission of K9 Officer Rex and the late Officer Brian Hall. The footage shook with movement, sounds of yelling and pounding boots in narrow hallways. Rex moved with precision, barking once before charging into a darkened room. Then, it happened. The table collapsed, revealing a small figure curled beneath a blanket. The camera captured her face for just a second. Wide eyes, tear-streaked cheeks, clinging to a stuffed animal. Even 3 years later, Ellie hadn't changed much. Gasps rose in the courtroom. Rachel wept openly now. Ellie sat quietly beside her, watching her own past flash across the screen. Then the image froze, Rex standing between the child and a figure with a weapon. And that weapon fired. Screams. Chaos. And finally, silence. The screen went black. The lights rose again, revealing a courtroom full of stunned expressions. Judge Metcalf cleared his throat. It is now undeniable. This child was a witness in a federal raid. The fact that she was never identified or protected afterward raises serious concerns. The father, seated stiffly across the room, turned pale. His hands trembled. His lawyer looked as if he might melt into his chair. Mr. Donovan, the judge said slowly, you stated under oath that your home had never been raided, nor involved in any criminal investigations. That is now proven false. I didn't know. She remembered. He stammered. You didn't know she survived, the judge corrected, or that this dog saved her life. Rex didn't flinch. His eyes never left Ellie. And you dared petition for full custody. The judge continued. You put this girl's life in danger, not once but twice. First by hiding her in a drug house, and now by dragging her into a courtroom, hoping her silence would protect your lies. The gavel slammed. Motion for emergency custody granted to the mother, effective immediately. The father will be taken into custody pending criminal investigation. Rachel gasped. Ellie, hearing the noise, looked up at her mother with a confused expression. She didn't understand all the words, but she felt something shift. Peace. Freedom. Safety. As deputies approached Donovan, he turned one last time toward Ellie, but she wasn't looking at him. Her eyes were on Rex, her hand gently resting on his back. He had protected her once from gunfire. Now, He'd protected her again with truth. Torres stood at the edge of the courtroom, eyes wet. "You did good, buddy," she whispered to Rex. "Real good." Rex didn't bark or wag. He simply sat taller, like a warrior who had just won the battle no one else saw coming. The police department's old case files were reopened that same evening. What was once considered a closed operation, a successful raid with tragic loss, was now under a new lens. For the first time, the child in the shadows had a name. Ellie. Detectives poured through every page of the August 12th incident. Officer Brian Hall's final report had mentioned possible child sounds, but chaos had overtaken the moment. Backup had been late, fire was exchanged. There had been no time for a full sweep. When they pulled survivors out, Rex had already taken a bullet and was found lying near a fallen officer and a stuffed animal. No child was found, just the toy. Now, 3 years later, Ellie's presence explained everything. Torres sat in the precinct late into the night, reviewing footage, frame by frame. Her eyes were red, but she couldn't look away. She could see it clearly now. Rex hadn't been charging at a suspect. He was shielding Ellie. His positioning, his stillness, it had all been deliberate. He knew where she was, and he'd placed himself between her and danger. Rachel and Ellie had been moved to a secure location for their protection. The media had picked up hints of the story, calling Rex a hero dog, but the full truth was still too sensitive to reveal. Investigators needed time, and Ellie, she needed healing. That night, Ellie curled up in a blanket at a safe house, Rex sleeping just inches away. He hadn't left her side once. Rachel sat across the room, watching in silence. "He remembers her," she whispered to the social worker present. The woman nodded, "And she remembers him." Rachel wiped a tear from her cheek. "I used to think she made it through that nightmare because she was lucky, but now I know it was because of him." The following morning, Rachel was asked to return to court briefly to testify about what Ellie had said and confirm timelines. But the most crucial testimony wouldn't come from Rachel. It would come from Ellie herself. Only if she's ready, the judge had made clear. But Ellie had surprised everyone. At the mention of court, she didn't cry or hide. She looked down at Rex and whispered something in his ear. Then she nodded. She was ready. In court, Rachel sat at the front bench. Ellie was broad and slowly, her hand gripping Rex's leash like it was her lifeline. She didn't speak at first. She simply walked over and sat beside him again, just as she had that first day. The judge leaned forward. "Ellie, can you tell me who this dog is?" Silence. Ellie stared at the judge, then down at Rex. Her fingers moved gently over the back of his head, and then she spoke. "Boom boom," she said softly. "He saved me." Rachel gasped quietly. Ellie wasn't done. She looked across the courtroom at the place her father had once sat. It was empty now. He was in custody, awaiting charges. "He stayed," she said. "When the bang happened, he stayed with me." Torres, watching from the corner, blinked back tears. The judge leaned back, taking a breath before speaking. "That's enough, sweetheart. You've done something very brave and very good." Ellie buried her face in Rex's fur. It was the kind of testimony no lawyer could cross-examine, no court could ignore, because it wasn't just truth, it was memory, innocent, raw, real. It confirmed what the police now knew beyond doubt. Rex had shielded that little girl during the worst moment of her life, and by some miracle, both of them had made it out alive. Now, fate or something greater had reunited them again, and neither one was letting go. The police station was unusually quiet. The deeper investigators dug into the August 12th raid, the more it became clear something had been buried intentionally or by negligence. A witness was overlooked. A child, traumatized and voiceless, had vanished from official records without anyone noticing. Detective Monroe, now leading the internal inquiry, sat hunched over printed stills from the raid footage. In one, Rex was half collapsed on the floor, bleeding. Just inches away, a stuffed animal with a single button eye sat next to a blanket. They'd assumed the toy belonged to a suspect's child who wasn't home. But now, that elephant was sitting on Rachel's kitchen table. There was no denying it. "Get me all reports on minors within a 10-mile radius of the raid location, who were processed into foster care or emergency clinics within 72 hours of the incident." Monroe ordered his team. "I want names, ages, everything." As the data rolled in, a gap became glaring. A female toddler, age estimated between 2 and 3, had been found by a neighbor wandering barefoot a block away from the scene. The night after the raid, no ID, no matching DNA records. CPS placed her into emergency care under the temporary name Jane Doe 17. That child was Ellie. Everything connected now. The reports, the toy, the timing. The missing puzzle piece was finally in place. Back at the safe house, Rachel sat with Torres and Ellie. A quiet evening hung between them. The news of the investigation's progress was shared gently carefully. Rachel had broken down when told that the system had lost her daughter once already. Just after the raid, they said she wandered out the back door after the chaos. Torres explained. She was picked up, placed into a shelter, then finally traced back to you 2 weeks later after a DNA match. But no one connected it to the raid. No one thought to. Rachel wiped a tear. I always knew something happened that night. She used to cry in her sleep and scream at loud noises. But she was so young. I didn't think she could remember. Ellie sat on the floor, quietly brushing her stuffed elephant's ear with one finger. Rex lay beside her, head across her lap. Then she looked up. Rex was hurt, she said softly. Both women froze. Rachel leaned forward. Sweetheart, do you remember that? Ellie nodded. He got boomed, but he stayed. Torres swallowed hard. She means he was shot, but he didn't leave her. Did he bark? Rachel asked gently. No, Ellie said, hugging Rex's neck. He was quiet, like me. Rachel and Torres exchanged a glance. There was something else. Something Ellie wasn't saying yet. But her eyes were opening. Her silence was beginning to lift. The next day, Ellie had her first trauma assessment with a child psychologist. Rex was allowed to stay in the room. No one was surprised when he climbed onto the floor mat beside her and laid his head in her lap again. The therapist used puppets and drawings, letting Ellie guide the session. She drew a picture of a house with a big X over it, a small girl under a table, and a big dog standing in front of her. Did the dog help you? The therapist asked. Yes. Were you scared? Ellie nodded slowly. I stayed under. Then it got quiet. Then I walked outside, the back way. And then she pointed to the drawing of the street. I looked for Rex, but he wasn't there. The therapist looked at Rachel and Torres. That's likely when she left the house, wandered off while officers were distracted. She was found hours later. Rachel bent down and kissed her daughter's head. But he found you. Again. Sweetheart, he came back. Ellie looked at Rex, then nodded. He's my dog now. And no one in the room disagreed. Not even Rex. Word spread faster than wildfire. The headline broke on a quiet Thursday morning. Retired police dog reunites with child. He shielded during deadly raid. Within hours, local news turned national. Photos of Rex lying beside Ellie in court were everywhere. News vans lined the street outside the safe house, prompting police to relocate Rachel and Ellie again for their protection. But even inside guarded walls, something extraordinary was happening. Ellie was talking more. Not much, but enough. When Rachel helped her brush her hair in the morning, Ellie now asked, "Where's Rex?" At meals, she whispered, "He likes peanut butter too," and pushed a small spoon toward his bowl. She had begun humming lullabies while drawing, sometimes even laughing, when Rex rolled over onto his back to ask for belly rubs. Her therapist called it trauma integration, but Rachel knew what it truly was. Healing. Rex didn't do tricks. He didn't fetch. He didn't even respond to most commands unless Ellie gave them. His bond wasn't one of training anymore. It was loyalty, a silent, living thread connecting to survivors of the same nightmare. That week, the court reconvened one final time. It wasn't a custody hearing this time, it was a criminal arraignment. Ellie's father, Daniel Donovan, stood before the judge, in an orange jumpsuit, flanked by his attorney. He was charged with obstruction, child endangerment, false testimony, and potential involvement in organized trafficking activities related to the 2019 raid. The evidence had been damning. Surveillance, footage of him on the property, matched fingerprints, bank records, all painting a clear picture. His defense tried to claim ignorance, saying he thought the girl had blocked out the event, that she didn't remember him being involved. But he was wrong. Ellie remembered more than he knew. The judge allowed a final closed-door testimonial with Ellie and her therapist. Torres and Rachel watched from behind the mirror. "Do you remember your daddy being in that house?" the therapist asked. Ellie nodded. Double quotes, "Was he nice?" She was quiet, then shook her head. "He yelled." "What did Rex do?" Ellie looked up. "He stood in front of me. When Daddy picked up the thing." "The thing?" Ellie formed a shape with her hands. "A gun." Rachel felt her stomach drop. The therapist gently asked, "Was that when you heard the boom?" Ellie nodded again. "And Rex didn't leave?" "No," she whispered. "He stayed." The next morning, the judge issued a final ruling: full legal and physical custody to Rachel Morgan. Daniel Donovan was denied all contact and would remain in custody, pending further charges from federal agencies now involved in the case. When the gavel came down, there were no cheers, only silence, a heavy, relieved kind of silence. Rachel knelt beside Ellie as they left the courtroom, tears slipping down her cheeks. "You did it, baby. You really did." Ellie looked up and smiled faintly. Rex helped. That afternoon, outside the courthouse, reporters waited behind barricades. Cameras clicked rapidly as Ellie stepped into the sunlight, clutching Rex's leash with one hand and her elephant with the other. A deputy tried to escort them around the crowd, but the judge himself stepped forward. He knelt down to Ellie's level and smiled gently. "Miss Ellie," he said, "you've shown more courage than most adults I've ever met." She said nothing, just smiled and patted Rex's head. Judge Metcalf stood and addressed the crowd. This child's courage and this dog's loyalty changed the course of justice. What was lost has now been found, and in this courtroom, truth guided by the innocent prevailed. That quote would go viral within the hour, but Ellie didn't notice the headlines or flashing lights. She only knew that Rex was still with her dad, and for the first time in a very long time, she felt safe. Weeks had passed since the courtroom drama. That changed Ellie's life forever. The press had dubbed Rex the silent hero, a loyal dog whose bravery and quiet strength had saved a child twice over. But behind the headlines, the real story was unfolding, one of healing, trust, and a bond deeper than words. Ellie was no longer the frightened, silent toddler she had been. Slowly, with the gentle guidance of therapists and the unshakable presence of Rex, she began to speak, not always in full sentences, but enough to paint her world with words. And Rex was always there, her shadow, protector, and friend. On a warm, summer morning, the family gathered at a small community center for a private ceremony honoring Rex's service. Law enforcement officers, social workers, and close friends surrounded them. The judge, the therapist, even Officer Torres were present, smiling through tears. Rachel knelt beside Ellie, who clung to Rex's neck as the ceremony began. The judge spoke first. "Today, we honor not just Rex's past service to this community, but the incredible courage of a little girl whose trust and bravery have brought light to a dark story." Ellie's eyes sparkled as the judge reached into his pocket and pulled out a small medal. He pinned it gently on Rex's collar. The room erupted into quiet applause. Ellie looked up at the dog and whispered, "Thank you, Rex." Rex lifted his head, ears perked, and licked her cheek softly. His tail wagged slowly, his eyes full of warmth. The therapist smiled and leaned toward Rachel. "That's it," she said. "She's healing." Rachel nodded, tears brimming. Those two words. She whispered, "Boom boom, they saved her. They saved us." The court cases had closed, and Donovan was now facing federal charges related to child endangerment and trafficking. Meanwhile, Ellie's story inspired a push for reforms in how child witnesses and survivors of trauma are supported in the justice system. Rex became an ambassador for therapy and service dogs, visiting schools and hospitals to bring comfort and hope. Ellie's life, once marked by fear and silence, was blossoming. With each new word, each new smile, she reclaimed the childhood she deserved. One evening, as the sun dipped low over the horizon, Rachel watched Ellie playing in the backyard with Rex. Ellie ran, laughing, her little hands reaching for her loyal friend. Rex bounded after her, protective yet gentle. Rachel's heart swelled with gratitude. From the darkest moments of silence and danger, a bond had been forged that could never be broken. Two souls who saved each other, and two words. The words a little girl whispered in a courtroom had stunned everyone, but saved a life. Boom boom.